Mo, I'm super honored to have you on the Buyer Enablement podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here. I'm really excited to talk to you today.
Mo, did you see how effortlessly I flowed into that transition? We are already live. We are already doing this podcast. We're doing this right now. No, I had the pleasure. I didn't know you until like 2 weeks ago. And then Jared, our marketing manager here, he put you on the calendar for the Buyer Enablement podcast. And he's like, do a quick intro call, get to know each other a little bit here. And no joke, that call was so epic. I wish we would have just been recording it the whole way through. I don't know how we're going to be able to replicate this today, but I'm telling you, anybody that's listening to this episode, that may or may not know Mo, this is going to be one of the better Buyer Enablement podcast episodes. I can tell you that with 100% certainty right now, unless she forgets all the brilliant gems that she dropped last time. Exactly, right? So let's get into this. Before we go too far, let's just bring everybody up to speed on who you are, what you do, your background, those sorts of things, so people know who they're listening to here.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Mo. I have been basically in all sorts of customer-facing roles of all types for the last 15 years of my professional career. Everything from regular customer service in a call center to service industry customer service to I used to sell as seen on TV products live in department stores.
No, really?
I used to basically be the ShamWow guy.
Wow. Wow.
And it was the hardest sales job ever because it was 100% commission and it was totally live.
But it was ShamWow. ShamWow basically sold itself.
That is true. And we also did the knives. We did like the Ginsu knives.
The Ginsu knives that'll chop through anything?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That was actually a really fun demo because you'd like cut through wood and cut through steel. And then you would like have the tomato and you'd be like, and it's still going to cut through the same right tomato. So anyway, I've been on the true support side, the sales side. And then as I moved into SaaS, I was more in the customer success world.
Okay.
And so I'm really just very passionate about kind of full customer life cycle, enablement, full customer life cycle, customer success, start to finish customer experience is all things that I'm super passionate about.
This was the moment that I wish we would have captured on our get to know each other. It was this moment here where we started talking and I was explaining to you what the topic of this podcast is and what our idea of buyer enablement was. And there's no way we can replicate the reaction that you had to this. It was like a praise Jesus sort of moment where it was like, oh my God, people believe in this. People are doing this. People are preaching this. I've been waiting for people to talk about this. It was so great. But the reason specifically that we wanted to have you on this show, so far, the guests that we've had on the show are primarily in sales roles, business development, specifically sales roles in their organization. But buyer enablement is important, reaching far outside of just the sales efforts. And like every guest has said, and I've said a million times already, if you're in a customer facing role, you are in a revenue generating role. And you have to be focused on that and you have to think about it that way. I wanted to have you on specifically to talk about your background in customer success because it is so critically important to the whole picture of enabling buyers, because once they've bought from you, now they're your customer. They still have a lot of needs. They still want it to be simple to work with you. How do we do that? So can you just talk to me about customer success, what you define this whole customer success role as? I think that would help a lot of people on here.
Yeah. So the way I define customer success, and I know there's a lot of different definitions out there of customer success. Some people kind of loop it in the same world as account management. Some people totally misattribute it to straight up customer support and just, it's like almost like VP of sanitation for a janitor, like in that regard. That is obviously I have the most utmost respect for customer support. That's my background. Yeah. That was not like a dig in that regard, but just in terms of another name for a similar thing. Yeah. Whereas I think of customer success very much as making customers understand the value of your product long term and helping them achieve their business goals with your product.
Yes.
And so this is what makes it that different from sales is, sales is really getting someone to buy in, like to get them to sign the dotted line, to pull them over the finish line, to get them to buy into a dream. And so customer success is about taking that dream and teaching them and educating them and enabling them how to make that dream a reality. And so many people make the mistake of thinking, well, once they've bought into the dream, they're going to be able to figure out how to make that dream happen. Or, all they have to do is sell them on the dream. But the truth is, in my experience is, in the last really 5 years talking to customers one-on-one as they were both evaluating, but even after they've signed the dotted line, they'd be like, oh, well, we really like Help Scout, or we really like Moxion, but they're actually only using the most basic functionality of it and not even using the full value of the product, which is usually so obvious internally, but then externally, it's not obvious at all to customers. And so then you find this is where customer success plays into retention, is because people if they're not using the full value of the product, they don't see a reason to stick around with it, especially if they're only using the most simple elements of it. So by missing out on customer success and teaching them full adoption, you are losing customers in terms of the retention game, because they're not getting everything that they pay for. And the other thing it does is it just really, it's so rewarding when you teach a customer how to use your product, because for the most part, they all have a really basic, you can get a really basic idea from a sales demo and a really basic idea from an in-app onboarding, or a couple of knowledge-based articles. But what is often missing is that piece of, how do I accomplish goals? Not how do I upload this, or not how do I set this up, but how do I accomplish this goals with this collection of feature set? And that is what I think of when I think of customer success, is just teaching customers how to use the product in a way that helps them accomplish their goals. It almost makes you part of their in-house operations team, or it almost makes you what's it called? A consultant?
I don't know if you got one right word there, but that's fine. Somebody out there knows what you're trying to get at.
I was a consultator.
Sure.
It almost makes you a business consultant to help them realize business goals, but you're just a business consultant that's specifically related to the software that you're serving.
Yeah. Listen, there are sales professionals listening to this right now going, well, that's actually what I do. Okay.
Sure.
And what I would say is, well, then you're in the top 5% of sales professionals. If you're saying that, and you're doing your job well, and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, today's sales professionals should not just be out there selling. They should be out there strategizing, becoming ingrained in their customer, identifying exactly what their goals are, helping them achieve those goals, structuring the deal properly, right? That's what we're supposed to be doing. That's why they always say help, don't sell now, right?
Yep.
But what you're getting at is, even if it's done properly, there is always avenues to help them use whatever they purchased better. Always, always, always. Because I think what's crystal clear is humans as a species, we tend to take the easy road, right? This is why the easy button was so popular for Staples, right? We tend to take the easy road. If something is fast and simple, that's what we're going to do. And when we're talking about licensing softwares or products or things that are of a technical nature, and there's a lot of different bells and whistles to it, we tend to gravitate towards the things that are easiest to learn. And then we kind of stick with those things. And the problem is, if we're not there from a customer success perspective, helping to nudge them along and say, hey, I noticed that you do this a lot. Did you know that you could do this a lot easier if you did this? Oh man, no, I didn't know that at all. Yeah, let me show you that real quick. Well, boom. Now that customer is probably going to be happy for another 3 months, right?
Exactly.
And then you check in with them and you say, hey, I noticed that you started doing this as well. Did you know that we actually just rolled this out? This would help you do this better, right? Well, now that customer's happy again, right? Because now they're finding new tools, new gems, right? If you look at tools like Photoshop, for example, I bet the average Photoshop user uses maybe 15% of that entire
product. If that. I think 5. I think they I think 5% of that tool. Yeah.
I can resize images. I can erase the background.
I can crop. I can cut things. I can
It's good enough. Now I'm a professional designer, right? I mean, even professional designers, there are tools within that software that are just like, you're never going to get to them. You're never going to need to use them, and you're never going to know they're there. Mm-hmm. There might come opportunities in your life where you might need them, but you don't even know that it's an opportunity because like you've never gotten to that.
Well, and this is what's so interesting too, especially with organizational software, right? Is because you also have situations where not every feature of a tool appeals to the same person in an organization. So like maybe you have some let's take Help Scout as an example. Like we have some tools that probably are more appealing to a more customer success leaning relational type of support versus a reactional type of support. And there are some features in there that for people who are like more in reactional, they're like using them all the time, but they're not really that relevant to people who have more of like, or actually Moxion is a good example too, because we have, so Moxion is a film production workflow software. So essentially it covers, I don't know how familiar this audience is with Hollywood filmmaking.
It's a very high class audience listening to this show, so probably very familiar. Yes.
But so it spans like a production and a post-production workflow for filmmaking, starting at the production point where there's a product we have called Immediates, where the camera person can take footage directly from Moxion or directly from the camera and put it in Moxion immediately, which is actually like kind of amazing in itself. And that's usually, and honestly, like what people use, because that technology in itself is just so incredible that they're like, this is all we're using. That's fine. Mm-hmm. But then the other thing is so then you can like, I'm going to start speaking super technically now. So then you can download it as like a DNX, and then you can send it to Avid, which is an editing software, and the editor can do an edit really fast, and then they can send it back. And then down the line, you can use it for like colorists can use it for like HDR review, and we can support Dolby Vision and all of these things. And the truth is the first entry point person who is using us for Immediates is not necessarily going to be using us as a colorist. They might know the colorist, but they won't, that's not in their use case. So having that customer success person being able to navigate through all of these different people after they've signed, it's kind of part of like a land and expand strategy, right? Like you land in this one area where it's just like, okay, this person is using us for this use case, but like now you have a relationship and you're already using the product, and you can kind of suss out how these other features will play to continue adoption. It makes your product stickier, and also in many cases leads to upgrades and expansions.
Yeah, I love that. All right, let's go down a couple of hot items. And let's just put it out there. Like you're not speaking about any business you're associated with right now. Let's drill back into your background.
Yes.
Right. Or maybe let's just say, maybe these are things you hear on the periphery from other people in customer success roles. Okay. So nobody's getting thrown under the bus with these questions. All right. Full disclosure. All right. But I'm curious because I've been in sales my whole life. Customer success teams don't always love me. They haven't always loved me in every role that I've had. I'm getting better. I have flaws, but I'm getting better. But what are some of the things that you've either experienced or witnessed that customer success teams are really dying for sales teams to do better before it gets in their hands? Can we talk about some of those types of things?
Yeah. So I think this is a big thing for me. And I've experienced this at almost all places that I've had this interaction. But just, I think the level of knowledge of the product and the customer use case is much stronger in post signing the dotted line. Just in terms of even just like parts of the product that are, so this is where customer success and support actually intersect a lot. Because if you're in a small company, usually if you're customer support, you're also customer success and vice versa. It's not really until you scale that those roles tease out. But when you're in customer success / support intersection, you have an understanding of if people use the product in a wrong or incorrect way, what sort of problems and pain it causes. Or if people are not fully versed in how this is different than like a competitor, or how this is where, like actually enablement and education is, buyer enablement and education is spot on. Because if people are not aware, like they might come into a product thinking they're going to use it for this specific use case, and then that is incorrect, that then becomes a very challenging relationship to manage. Yeah. And so I think that just like ideally, like sales and success and support would be just so tightly integrated that like in terms of the customer use case and product use case knowledge, that they should really be the same. Like that you should really be operating under the same amount of knowledge. So it's not, because if you are a salesperson and you sell someone on this thing that you think the product can do, and like maybe it can on paper, but like you haven't felt the pain of the support and the success people that have to unfurl it later. That is like, oh, okay, well, you're using it this way, which is very similar to our competitor, but the product doesn't quite work that way. So it's not a direct mapping. So like, because of that, we have to actually unfurl all of these problems. And then sometimes what happens is once you unfurl it, they're like, oh my gosh, this is so much better and more simple to begin with. So it's like, oh, actually it would have been valuable to begin. Like you're not compromising any value by having that sort of knowledge. So that sort of product and customer use case knowledge, I think, is something that I wish sales teams were tighter on. And I have to be clear, I have also worked with some salespeople that are fantastic at this, that are like, honestly, because I really think of support and success in sales as like on an equal value playing field. So there's definitely times where I'm like, I would hire him or I would hire her. Like I would hire them on my team. So.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, look, and I say that all the time. It's so important to know what you're selling, to know your product, because it doesn't matter how many questions you ask your prospect during that first call where you're identifying their challenges and trying to map it to solutions. It doesn't matter how well you understand all those questions you ask. If you don't understand your product, the ins and outs of your product and where it's powerful and where it's not, where its limitations are, and if you're not willing to be honest about it with yourself and with your prospect, then you're just selling a sloppy deal and it's not going to go well. I can absolutely see. And I've seen where that has happened as an absolute train wreck at organizations where it's just not sold in the right way. It just isn't. Yeah. And then the team comes in to implement and start moving forward. And it's like, what are we supposed to do with this? Who sold this in? Right. And I think that that's why companies like ours implement a clawback on sales. It's not because I want to be greedy with commissions and like pull commissions away from salespeople. It's because I don't want to reward people for selling deals that hit their quota that shouldn't have ever been sold.
Yeah.
Right. It's kind of a safeguard, right? Are you sure this customer should be buying this? Are you sure that they're going to use it? Are you sure that they have a need for this? Because we don't want to bring them on, because you know what? If they only stay with us for 3 months, the bad word that they're going to spread in the community about their experience with this is not worth the 3-month gain on this.
Absolutely. I had that exact point on something I've experienced where a product was sold in an entirely wrong use case. It's just outside of the use case of what the product I was servicing did at the time. And, obviously they ended up churning, like that. It was no surprise. Like I have felt no guilt about it on the success side of things. Like I was just like, yeah,
not my problem.
I mean, and to be honest, if they had used it even in the way that they were intending to, they could have actually like taken down the entire system. Like it was like a situation where it was so far out of use case that it could have actually caused some serious problems. So yeah. Then and that's where it's like, and then it becomes a support issue. So like, that's why they're all like super connected, that it's like, if you're not, you need to be on the same page across every single step of what and actually support people. And we talked about this in our intro call as well. Support people, like, so once you scale out, right, and you are able to diversify and have all these different skill sets, on the actual true customer support side, they need to also be educated on the value of the product, because on the flip side of that, and this is like probably more internal enablement than buyer enablement, but from being able to have like a documented set of like value enablement that spans across the customer life cycle. The reason it's so important is because, so then you have customer support people and they're talking about something, and maybe a feature is broken that is so critical to their value. If they don't totally understand the magnitude of the fact that, well, maybe this just seems like a bug to you, but missing this deadline is actually like completely throws the total value of the software out, or not being able to execute this one task. And it's just like, oh, maybe it takes like a week, but it's just like, but that 1 week is exactly the value that they're having. And on top of that, it also, this is related to some of the things that I've done at Help Scout around support-driven growth. You can also support are great at recognizing opportunities for expansion themselves, because they see how someone is using the product. They can see how, if they're like, let's say you have a tiered system and they're abusing a middle tier and would be great at a higher tier and it would solve a lot of support problems. If they know the value of the product and how, from the support standpoint, are seeing these issues that they're running into, that's now become like a very contextual, helpful upsell opportunity that they can like present and educate the customer on themselves.
Yeah. So anybody that was listening just heard you ramble out a phrase real quick that we should actually go back to here. And it could actually be an incredible podcast name title, right? So if you're looking to start a podcast around this, support-driven growth, drill in on this a little bit more. What is, everybody listening to this is like, okay, we're already talking about buyer enablement. We didn't know what the heck that was.
What is this other thing?
Now Josh is making up more gobbledygook. This is great. I'm going to stop listening to this podcast right now. All he's going to do is make up words. But what is support-driven growth?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So support-driven growth is a basically methodology of business and philosophy, and sort of movement that was kind of started when I was at Help Scout. Because just some context of Help Scout, I started there in Help Scout's very early days, before we even had a sales team, definitely before we had a success team, where it was basically just customer facing team and we played all of the roles.
Nice.
And then again, with scale comes, diversification of roles, specialization, that sort of thing. But as somebody who was through Help Scout, so I was there for 4.5 years, and I actually, even within there, was on all sides of the customer lifecycle, sales, success, support. And through that experience, I was like, oh, a lot of these roles are actually not that different.
Yeah.
Like, you really need to know the same stuff. You need to, you have the same interactions with the customers, and yet they were valued so differently across the company as well. Like I'm going to say this anyway, because I don't work at Health Scout anymore anyway, but like I got a pay bump when I moved from support to growth/success. Had this essentially the same job, just talking to customers and like teaching them how to do things. And then, so a lot of the support-driven growth methodology was kind of a hybridizing of success and support that came from a tactical perspective. From a larger ideology perspective, it's shifting the perception of customer support from a cost center to a revenue driver. And that manifests in a couple of different ways. That was very, very much just in the way that Help Scout did support. So the first way, which was probably the most obvious way, is that support success hybrid, which is just that, you talking to customers is talking to customers and recognizing value opportunities and helping them get value from the product, which, might at some point come from the intro, might be a technical question, but then the output could still be driving them towards value. And that happened a lot with technical issues that we then found could easily be solved by an upgrade, like if they were just using something incorrectly. The second part of that is just in terms of, your customer support teams are basically like, people spend so much money on surveys and so much time on surveys, and they have them across all these different departments. When they're getting all of that feedback, like every single day, like in terms of what features people like, what features they don't like, what problems that they have, how they're using things, and so it's also about creating feedback loops between departments. So on the product side, it's like they get feature requests and problems, and then they relay it to product to prioritize and put on the roadmap. On the growth side of things, they get they have so much customer and product knowledge, and then they cycle it back to marketing and sales for positioning, branding, basically messaging. So they throw the information out, and then marketing comes back with them as like, well, here's the sexy way to say it, or here's the here's the positioning, and here's the actual value. Yeah. But it's it's about shifting the idea of support from this reactionary center where all of these other business leads make all the decisions, and then it trickles down into support. And then support actually does become a cost center, right? Because you have a bunch of people who are speaking to your customers that are the last people to know about a change, the last people to know about, what marketing message or what thing came out, and they're playing catch up all the time. But if you shift them to them being the center of information, that's how you truly get like a customer centric business that keeps the voice of the customer at the center. So it's taking so what support driven growth is, if I was just going to bullet it, is just almost making support like the true engine of your business, and using that to fuel all of the other departments' decisions by aggregating that feedback and knowledge to source the decisions, as opposed to them doing their own feedback and surveys and then trickling it down to support.
Yeah, so there's some salespeople listening to this one that are like, no, I'm the fuel in the business, right? So we can handle that offline with those individuals. That's fine. I love where you're going with this, though. I mean, and honestly, look, how many different parts of a company need to be looked at as a revenue driver instead of a cost center, right? Right. I mean, how many different departments could that touch? And also, what I would say is all of this reporting of information inside an organization is so important. Now, you use the example of someone in customer support or success. They come across some information where a customer's having some hardships, and they identify a solution for that. Now, there's a couple different things you can do with that information. Where you went was bringing it back to marketing so that marketing can make it sexy somehow, right? Yeah. I'm paraphrasing all of this, but what I would say is just think about if your sales team was cued into those challenges more readily, so that they had more time to think about an appropriate response to those things, because it's going to hit them. They're going to be on a demo call with someone's going to ask them about this, and they're going to fumble because they haven't been cued into the fact that this is a challenge that people are looking for, or this is a problem with our solution that we're trying to fix right now. Maybe this is in development, but it's really important that they know these things. This is the benefit that I have right now, having as small of a team as I have right now. Constant conversation between the development team, customer success, marketing, sales. Everybody is all part of a team right now. The challenge is going to be when we become 500 people instead of 5 people. How do you keep that consistency going? Because we're finding tremendous gains and success retaining customers, growing customers because we're so responsive and because we're always listening and because we're so available and we're always willing to iterate and change things and make it better and all that stuff. That doesn't scale though, unless you figure out how that scales. How do you do that? I mean, how do you go from, and maybe, I don't know if you have the answer to this, but if you do, I'm going to send you a reward. How do you go from a startup where that's easy and everybody's involved? How do you implement that when you become the big boys?
So I actually do have some perspective on this. Although, to be fair, I've never actually worked for like a really big player. Like so Help Scout, I was in the first 20, I think. Okay. And then 20 employees. And then I left at like, just like over 110. So it was, and we went from, I think it was 3,000 companies, and people pay per user. So when I started, I think it was 3,000 companies. And when I left, it was over 10. So like, in terms of volume as well. And again, that's companies, not customers. Yes. Because, each company, you can have one customer or you can have like 500, so it was a pretty, I saw a trajectory there. And I think a lot of it comes down to tools that you use an organization, specifically in terms of shared documentation, especially if you're remote. So just having documented, like the same documented resource across teams, in terms of how to communicate about the product, who the customer is. HelpScout did a wonderful job about educating on persona, like even as a support person before support driven growth was educated on personas and how everything worked. And just having that being part of the transparent culture of just documented so everyone can have access to it. So it's not like this is the marketing wiki and only marketing has access to it. And this is the sales wiki and only sales has access to it. Instead, just making that open so everybody has access to that sort of knowledge. So for us, obviously I love Help Scout and I can't imagine using any other tool just because I think for a help desk that needs to, it's not really like a help desk, like the way like Zendesk is a help desk. It's really kind of more of like a shared email inbox that has help desk like features. So it's something you can totally use and create like a personal feeling experience in a sales or a success conversation. It feels like email to customers and it looks like it's coming from Mo Mckibbin as opposed to help desk support 257. So having a shared repository of information across multiple customer facing teams, or at least, so I would say like just having everyone have access to the same CRM and also conversational data. Just being able to aggregate those two sources is a really great way to kind of cross-share that information. Because what it really comes down to is just multiple teams having the same single source of truth. Mm-hmm. So you can find a data point in terms of like, well, we had like 200 conversations that were about this month, and you're out of 1,000 or whatever. And so every side of that coin, everyone can point to that, as opposed to sales having their metrics and support having their metrics. And then maybe product ran a small survey and they have a collection of metrics. And then, marketing did some market research and then they have this. So that creates all of this siloed information. So aggregating into a single source of truth is really helpful for having that sense of scale that is still transparent. I think that the way that I think about the way I think about support teams, and this is part of the support-driven growth methodology too, just in terms of structuring them is, like I said before, specialties come with scale. So you got 5 people, everyone's communicating and everything's doing things. When you have like 15 people or 20 people, as I said with the support-driven growth ideology, where you are kind of like this feedback loops between teams, you can actually break your support teams into specialties. So you can have a growth liaison whose job is to work with they're the liaison to the sales teams and to the marketing teams and to whatever the growth side of, however you're calling growth. they're the ones that are, communicating on the more value side of things, and are usually people, the customer success, the people who end up being customer success, that have like the one-on-one coaching calls and like the check-ins and in the kickoffs, and they can inform enablement. they're great for informing buyer enablement, internal enablement, like all of that marketing. Then you have all of that side of the information. Then you can have product specialists that are good at more of the product knowledge, that are the liaison to the product teams, that are great at aggregating things like voice of the customer, use cases. Like they know what problems people have and how they solve them. They don't necessarily think of the value or the shininess of it, but they do think of the like, this is how, and so it's like aggregating voice of the customer research for product. And then some people combine. So we're not the only people that have done this. Like there's like a lot of companies that break their support team into specialties that are like these little liaison envoys. Yeah. But oftentimes they see product and engineering combined. And I actually think you can tease them out because they both have a wealth of things to do. So like another thing could be like an engineering specialty who owns more of there would be considered more tier 2 technical support, traditional customer support. And they're the specialty that works with engineering on the bugs and the tight, like troubleshooting, status problems, QA, all of that side of things. Yeah. So by thinking of so in terms of scaling into this and still keeping kind of support at the center of these little like the center of the voice of the customer at the center of this. And by the way, I gladly welcome. I mean, I'm kind of in the camp. So first of all, obviously I love sales, but I'm kind of in the camp of like the more like chief customer officer sort of customers team. So I even think of sales could be an extension of this way of thinking, where it's just like they all sit on the customers team, and their specialty is customer acquisition versus customer, like on the engineering troubleshooting specialty. But it just keeps everyone beating to the same drummer.
I mean, basically, you just described how any organization could implement support-driven growth into their organization. So I hope, there's a lot of information there. I can't even begin to unpack all of that. I'm literally going to have to re-listen to that probably 4 times.
Sorry.
No, it's good, and that's why we record these things, right? That's why podcasts are great. Somebody can go back and listen to that and bring it back to their company. But you're totally right. That is exactly, and anyone listening, look, me and you, our background is in technology companies. So anyone listening that maybe is in a manufacturing company or whatever different industry you're in, there's going to be certain like roles that just don't exist. You're going to have to like place in other roles in your organization. But I think it's pretty clear to see how all these different pieces coming together with more transparency. You're already speaking the SalesReach language with the single source of truth. I love you for that, right? I mean, the single source of truth. It's so important that everybody just knows where to go for this information. What are we supposed to do here? What are we supposed to say? What are we working on next? All of these sorts of things. What are the key metrics? It's so important. Transparency is so important. The most successful organizations are just so transparent with what's going on, what's happening, right? And where are we moving with this thing? It just helps everybody stay more motivated, stay the course, right? Know where they're supposed to be going next and know how to lead those conversations. And I totally agree with you and love what you just said about sales. Not just should be a part of this. I would say sales could be a part, but I would say sales should be a part of this.
Agreed.
Right. And like I said earlier, sales should not, the word sales, it's just such a dirty word. It's just become such a dirty word. Right. And so I think that they should be considering themselves more strategists and more part of this support driven growth strategy but for a sales professional, it should be more, how do I support you, customer XYZ, to have more growth? Now enters my team, like they're going to help you as well. I'm, as the sales professional, like I'm helping support the growth of my organization. Yeah. But you as the team, you're also helping to support the growth of your organization by providing excellent customer support, helping them understand the product more, helping them upgrade the product to more advanced features or whatever it might be that they need, right? Like you're both both sides are being equally fed in this scenario. And that's what I love about it the most.
And I actually think, so going back to your earlier things about what is support, what could salespeople do to like work better with customer success, I actually think that uniting under both leadership, but also tools and processes, honestly, and speaking the same language, all of those things would eliminate that sort of typical support versus sales, like headbutting situation. It doesn't have to exist. These roles are actually very similar. They're actually very, I mean, like everyone needs to understand value, but everyone also needs to understand product and the customer, and everyone they just have a different focus and how to direct that knowledge.
Yes.
And that's really just the difference, is how are you directing that knowledge? Not that the fact that knowledge exists and it's shared. So I think that like having a closer, like almost similar team philosophy as opposed to a siloed philosophy actually would eliminate some of that tension. And they're almost like, I described it to someone else a while ago. It's like, it's interesting because, in engineering, you have a front end engineer, and you have a back end engineer, and you have a QA engineer, and you have all these like different engineering roles. And in marketing, you have brand marketing and content marketing and engagement marketing and all of these different sides of that coin. But then it's like you have sales and you have support, and it's just like maybe they're just the customer facing side. Like maybe it's just a customer facing team, and it's like the difference between a front engineer and a back end engineer.
Yeah. It totally is. Honestly, like this is exactly the way organizations need to start looking at it. And I think a lot of them are. And what I think is really, really funny is there is so much in the business news on let's just LinkedIn. That's my business news. There's so much on LinkedIn about the troubles between sales and marketing. Always fighting. Nobody ever talks about sales and customer success fighting, and yet they do. I don't know why we don't. It's like we're totally dismissive of their complaints. You know what I mean? It's like, shut up. I brought you this deal. Don't screw it up now. Like, I just brought in all this money. Just don't screw it up. Why aren't we talking about this more? And I think that's really funny. And I think that the good news here for anyone listening is I think we're catching this problem early enough that we can solve it before it becomes a big problem. I think that we're starting to realize that these sides are needing to come together, that there are some rifts, that there are some issues here. We need to start bringing them together, and we need to work fast. We need to do this now before it turns into this cliche sales and marketing don't get along thing for all these reasons. And it's a problem that can't be solved easily. I think it can still be solved easily, but I think it first starts with like, we need to acknowledge that there is a disconnect here.
And the customer suffers when there is. And that's, I think, the thing that I think businesses really need to understand is that when that isn't a tight partnership, and there's all sorts of reasons why it is not always, but like when that isn't a tight partnership, it is the person who suffers the most is the customer, because you could be like the best, most professional person in the world, but if you are there's a tension there that just even comes from saying like, oh, well, you really shouldn't be using the product this way, or just like, like there's a tension that they feel just from like, oh, okay, well, like I understand that's how you thought you were going to use the product. So that is something that, and then the customer feels like hoodwinked, that they were sold something that is not, what they're getting something that wasn't what they were sold. So I do think it's so important that that relationship is ironclad. And yeah, just working kind of off the same. I mean, sometimes I'm not going to say that people need to unite it on the same leadership, but like, I do think, and maybe the same in a small company, obviously they would be united probably under the CEO, but like, just in terms of the idea of the post-sale customer teams, we'll call them just post-sale customer teams, being separate from, sometimes under a different department, or sometimes they're like under product, or sometimes they're under marketing, or just like the idea of putting those people in a corner that's not at the same seat of table as sales, like I think is another thing that contributes to that sort of tension. And like really it should just be like a partnership.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So real quickly, because we're running out of time, man.
Sorry.
No, don't worry. This is just going to be one of those. I do this a lot. It's my fault, not yours. Are you of the camp that sales should be involved beyond the closing of the deal more than they are? Or are you of the camp that once the sale is done, that another team should be brought in for the success of that?
I am in the camp of that things should be done in depending on the value of and the amount of touch that a customer needs. Mm-hmm. So I am in the camp of a self-serve track and a high-touch track. And so we'll just say on the self-serve track, honestly, I don't even think there needs to be sales. Like, I mean, I think that's a marketing and support relationship almost perfect.
Oh man.
Completely.
This is where the robots replace us. Keep going.
Sorry.
Going. No, it's fine. Keep going.
But in a high-touch, high-value,
yeah.
Which is honestly what I think, from my understanding, salespeople like the most anyway, because they make the most commission off of it, and they have the most fun because it's the most strategic problems, and they like actually embedding themselves in organization. It's the most relational. So when I think of like what a sales role is, like that's what I think of. I think of it being the individuals that are responsible for huge deal, like facilitating relationships of huge deals. Versus just somebody who answers easy inbound questions. That is, So when I think about sales, and in which case, I think there's just a couple of different ways that you can structure it, and I don't know the correct answer. So I've definitely seen both versions of the sales. Kind of carries on almost into account management later. And then it's like a sales to account. Actually, no, I do have an opinion about this. I think the old guard way is like sales kind of carries into account management and has a relationship beyond. I think if the salesperson is excellent and is like really, really understands the product and the customer and can answer any question that comes up, that is fine. But otherwise it creates sales to account management, kind of creates this relationship with support, where it's like almost like this account manager is this middle person, whereas the person who's actually solving their problems really needs to have a direct relationship with the customer to be able to understand how to best serve them. And so that's where I think high touch customer success comes in, in which case you have the salesperson, you can have like a kickoff call or an introduction or something. And then it's just like, hey, when it comes to the product and like your success within it, like this is your spirit guide. Yep. Like this is your person who knows everything. And because that will help with, honestly, this is like just a general customer experience thing. And understand that my experience spans like my early stage customer support was all in D2C. So this is a D2C and a B2B thing. Like the customer experience thing that any customer hates the most is getting handed off to multiple people and having to repeat information. That is the biggest point of friction in the customer experience. So if you create a situation where you have like a liaison and then these other people that help, like you, like this relational person and then like the support people, like you're creating a situation that like, and they, people will say like, oh, it's better for the customer because they have this like person that they can hug. And it's just like, no, it's not better for the customer because they have this person that they go to and then they have to go explain the situation to someone else. And they don't have a relationship with that person. And then it is actually like a problem that could have been solved in an hour is now taking 3 hours because you have this like playing game of telephone in between. Yeah. And so that's where I think in the high touch environment, like you have this, I mean, like whether you're doing like account-based marketing and like have an account executive and like you have this relational side of that. And then it's like, and here is now your person. And this person, being customer success, also better know how to troubleshoot a bug.
Yeah. I'm following you on this. I'm following you on this for sure. I mean, and I think that definitely let's focus on the high touch sales, right? I personally find a lot of benefit keeping sales involved in it. I totally agree with you that there should be a new person that's introduced that is going to like steer things from there. But where sales is always beneficial, number one, if they're involved longer, at least in my mind, if they're involved longer, then they hold themselves more accountable to every deal that they sell in because they're actually part of the mess that they created if you're involving them, right? And none of us have time to be part of a mess. We just want to see things go really well so that they can move towards the next opportunity to sell them something more, right? And what I've also seen is that there's definitely different skill sets between somebody that's really impeccable as a sales professional versus someone that's really impeccable as a customer success person. And when it gets to the point where there's an opportunity for an upsell, many times it can be beneficial to have an actual salesperson that was in the room before to move them along, right? But it's not always necessary that way. So we're going to agree to kind of disagree, but basically agree, and it's fine. All right, so last question.
I just think it depends on the product, and probably a lot of it depends on the product and the customer, and also
it's fine. Yeah. This is where these problems stem for. Customer service is always trying to kick me out once I land the deal, and I want to make more money. This is the problem. and then they have the gall to come back and say, hey, I just upgraded that customer. I want commission on it. And that is where this whole thing blows up. So right here, you heard it, folks. Today, Josh, we are starting this rivalry right now.
It sounds like you might just want to be in customer success.
I don't want to be in customer success because I like to make money. No, I sounded like corporate pro when I just said that. That was horrible. That was totally out of character for me, but actually pretty close to on character. All right, last two questions. How many Ginsu knives do you have left in your house right now? How many Ginsu knives?
Oh, just 2.
You do? Okay.
Yeah.
Last final question. How wonderful was the ShamWow? Did it really work? Would it really suck up all of the moisture off the floor and wring it out and keep going?
So real talk on, first of all, I said ShamWow and Ginsu, but that's just because those are brand names. My exact company was actually like the off-brand so it was called Mastercut 2, which was basically the Ginsu knife. And
it's not basically the Ginsu.
No, it's
either Ginsu or it's not.
It's the same manufacturer in China.
This is horrible. Mo, you lied. You started this whole episode offline. You did not represent the ShamWow. You did the dollar store version of both of these things.
No. It's the same,
credibility's lost.
Same product, but it was like a different. Okay, fine.
All credibility's lost. It's a big liar. It's fine. I'm going to send you a real ShamWow because I thought it was actually fabulous.
This product that works exactly identically the same and is completely manufactured from the same facility.
Yeah. You still work for them? No, I'm kidding.
No. Yes. But what it was is it worked really, really well the first time. Yeah. But if you washed it, it would like not ever really work again.
Oh, so that's really funny.
Yeah, I mean, you're not even, and that's the thing is, it's like, so it's just like, if you're using it to replace a paper towel, like, it's just like a very expensive paper towel.
And this is where marketing screws everything up, because they came in and said, ShamWow, this is wonderful. And everyone else was like, no, this is like the most expensive paper towel in the world. This is a disposable beach towel is what this is.
It would, because that's exactly like how, like it wouldn't like stop working immediately. And so you're not supposed to put it in the dryer. And so even if you didn't put it in the dryer, it didn't matter though. So like you could, so if you washed it, like the first time, I would say it would just like, it would just like lose like, it would like have like there would be like a magic cloth half-life. So it's just like, it would like lose half its power. And then the next time you washed it would lose like another half of its power. It would just keep degrading. The knives are good. Like I stand by those knives. I actually really, really like them. They're kind of ugly. Like they're not like there's definitely like nicer looking knives.
Yeah, it's not a Wustov or anything like that. Yeah, that's fine.
But they totally work and they are still sharp. And I had that job when I was 20 and I am not 20 anymore.
Yeah. Well, there you go. They've lasted this long. All right. Well, listen, anyone, for the tens of people that tune into this, I'm looking at Jared for a number count. I think we're up to 4 people. I don't know. No, I'm kidding. But look, hopefully we didn't cost those companies too much money with that. But what we did do in this episode, I think, is really detail a really great approach for people to embrace this whole support-driven growth methodology in their organization. And like, it's so tied into buyer enablement, to sales enablement, to sales acceleration, all the important things to just drive revenue in your organization. Like, Mo, this has been really great. It's been really great getting to know you. Now we're buddies. So now you got to be a part of other content that we produce down the road.
Of course. Okay. And I'd love to talk more about enablement specifically, because I'm very passionate about it.
Well, let's do more about enablement. We're gonna do we'll do like a webinar down the road or something. We'll have you come back and talk specifically about enablement. But we've already talked for an hour. Nobody's still listening. We got to make this thing stop at some point. I want you to have an incredible weekend. So make sure you do that. And thank you so much for being a part of this.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Have a good one.
All right.
Bye.